Even though the apostles had been with Jesus for about 3 years, witnessing his miracles and listening to his preaching, they still didn't get it. And that is quite obvious in today's gospel. The apostles seem focused on using their discipleship for personal gain. They argue among themselves about who is the greatest. We get the impression that their personal ambition, their status, was the primary motivation for following Jesus. What's happened to their faith? The great paradox of today's gospel is that while Jesus is predicting he will lay down his life with utmost humility and suffer rejection for the sake of mankind, the apostles are arguing over who is the greatest. Jesus is trying to show them that the path to greatness, the path to everlasting life, is the path of selflessness, the path of humility, the path of service to others. Then Jesus uses a child as an example of what they should strive to become. You see, in Jesus' time, a child had absolutely no social status. A child was basically a non-person until they grew into adulthood. Jesus used the example of the child for shock value, to make a point. He is attempting to teach the apostles and us that they should strive to be open and trusting like a child. That is where true greatness lies. Not in power, not in authority, not in worldly possessions, but in humility, in service, in self-denial. That is the lesson of today's gospel and the theme of Jesus' entire ministry. I will be the first to admit that this is a difficult lesson, especially in the context of our American value system, a system where more is considered better. More power, more authority, more status, more money, more things. Sometimes we are so busy getting, we have no time for giving. And I'm not talking about giving financially. I'm talking about giving of oneself, giving of one's time, giving of one's talent for the benefit of others. Others who may be less fortunate or who may be experiencing a temporary setback. You know, if we are honest with ourselves, we recognize that we tend to be like the apostles in today's gospel. We want to share in the glory, the recognition, the rewards of this life, because that is part of our human nature. By recognizing this, we need to ask ourselves a few questions. First of all, do we accept the crosses in our own lives with faith and hope? Do we seek the path of humility and service, especially when it comes to the weak, the helpless, the vulnerable? Do we embrace those that society would rather push aside and forget? The poor, the mentally challenged, the disabled, the victims of disease. Do our lives reflect an example of Christian love, an example of compassion, an example of forgiveness and humility? These are tough questions, and each of us is called through our baptism to answer these questions in our own way, in our own hearts, and in our own time. You see, the answers truly define who we are. The readings today make it perfectly clear. The ultimate inheritance is ours if we choose to follow Jesus' path of humility, forgiveness, and compassion. So I leave you with one final question. Perhaps the most important consideration of all. Who are you, and what governs your daily choices?